First part of a series that we're doing to build interior doors for your home. What we're going to use on our project is 2x4 studs along with some 1x12 panels. What we're making is a panel door for the inside. And what we're going to do is plane the wood using this rigid 13-inch planer. I find the rigid planers are the best planers because it gives you a little bit more width for personal use. So what we got to do first is set the dial on your cut right here. You have this locking mechanism to raise and lower the feed. What you want to do is take a bare minimum amount of wood off at each time. So when you set your wood right here, you want to let that ball bearing just barely raise up, and you want to do 1/64 of an inch at each pass. So now that your machine is all set up, what you want to do is use a little small piece of scrap lumber to put in front of the wood that you're planing. The reason for that, a typical planer does what they call cuffing. This is an exaggerated view, but when you put it in the planer, this way, when you put it in the planer like that for the first time, it's going to make a big indentation on your mark. So it's best to use a piece of scrap material, then go with your material that you're planing. I'll demonstrate. Always wear your safety glasses. So what we're going to do is turn on this Grizzly vacuum. That's the electric is going to get a little loud in here. Make sure hands, guards out of the way. And what we're going to do is start feeding. You got to get your material all ready to be prepped. Move this out the way. Now that we've planed the top half of the first set of 2x4s, what we want to do now is unlock the device. And on this rigid, you can turn it a quarter turn down. That way it'll remove 1/64 of material on your pass. Now that we did the planing of both sides, we're going to continue that process by taking off very little material after each pass until we hit a little bit below 1 3/8 in order to build the frame. Now that we plane the 2x4s, I got it right at 1 3/8, a little shy of 1 3/8.
Bring it up higher.
Now what I want to do is square the two ends. I'm going to use the rigid planer for that, and maybe after Rigid looks at this video, they can buy me a joiner, edge joiner. So that's same process. Going to take off a little bit at each time, flip it over, do the other side, go down 1/2 crank each time, and then it'll be perfectly square. So now that we planed the 2x4s on all 4 sides, now you can see it's perfectly square all the way around. So now these will be our stiles and our rails. So the next part of the project is we're going to cut a dado in here, a little bit more than 1/2 inch. But we're going to use this 1x on here. Now 1x12 is 3/4 inches. So what we're going to do is take off a 1/4 inch of material on each side. I'm going to go down a little bit less than 1/2 inch. So then the panel will slide into the stile and the rail. So on the rigid planers, they have this little stop guide. They preset from 1/8 inch all the way down to all the way up to 1 3/4. I wish they would have a 1 3/8, but that's only wishing. So what I'm going to do is put it at a stop of 1/2 inch. So no matter how far I turn this down, I keep turning it down, it won't let me plane more than 1/2 inch. So what we're going to do is set up the planer, plane the panels, get that process done, and then we can start our next phase of the project. So now we're going to plane the panels, like I said earlier, to 1/2 inch thick. Always make sure you get rid of all your staples, because you know how the barcodes are stapled, and you just want to make sure all the staples are removed so it doesn't mess up your blades and the planer. Same process. I'm going to remove 1/64 off of each side until I get to 1/2 inch thick. Alright, so what we're going to do is turn on the Grizzly vacuum cleaner. Make sure no obstructions are in the way. Now that we planed this 1x, we now have right underneath 1/2 inch for our panels. So the next step is I'm going to go to the router table, put a straight edge bit just to remove the factory edge to make it straight, just like what we did on the planer, but those boards are too skinny. So I took a straight edge bit, and you could just use a scrap piece of material, and if you turn it, your blade, you'll see that it's just going to take off a little bit of that material, but you want your cut side to be flush. So I'll do a test demo. And now we see we just skimming the surface so that way it'll be straight on each side. So now let's go ahead, do our panels. Turn, put on those eye savers. Now this tool right here is called the gripper. It's a hand saver, but it allows you to move your work a lot easier. I would suggest getting a couple of these. It makes life a lot easier, especially when you need to move a large piece of material or small pieces of material. You just move your hand right there. So it's called the gripper. They sell about 40 bucks on Amazon or from the factory. It comes with a good little instructional video. Here's the box. As you can see, I have two of them. This is called the Gripper Advance. I would suggest getting the advanced model because the plate is a little bit wider than on the regular version. So let's go ahead and set up for our panels. In this piece, I think we don't need to use the gripper. The gripper is mainly used for whenever using the smaller pieces. So let's go ahead and get our rigid flip top together. These are awesome because what it does, it has this little pin on here and the little folding legs, and it makes storage a lot easier. Get these at your local Home Depot. Rigid. Little cotter pin right here. Turn this little key. You want you to set it up about level, and you're ready to go. Turn on the Grizzly vacuum and the Grizzly round. It put a good clean surface cut, horizontal, 90 degrees from each other, versus this rough edge that you get from the lumber store. All right, so now it's time to cut the groove into the seals, stiles, and rails, so then that way it'll fit perfectly whenever you're done. So we planed this, we got our... So what you want to do, make sure the router's unplugged. Take off any type of fencing that you might have, or you might have a fence already. So what you want to do is find the center of this to the edge to the center of your 2x4. So it's good to use a little test piece as your pattern. So now whenever you route your insert, you'll see that will go perfect. And it does take trial and error like you saw in this one where I was off a little bit. So just use a couple pieces of scrap wood that's equal to the thickness of the wood that you already planed. So that way you can work off of that center versus a regular piece of wood. My suggestion is once you got your center, don't route all the way up. Go in little small increments. And what I've done here from this point to this point is a little bit over a ½ inch because I want to be extended a little bit more whenever I insert this, to be like a 1/16 of an inch on each side. So we'll get started with routing this. Put on the safety glasses. Now, of course, can't use my vacuum because my vacuum system won't work, obviously. So we'll just have a little sawdust on the floor. Maybe me and my wife can do some dancing on the sawdust later on this evening. So now that we've finished doing the grooves, now we're going to cut the stiles and the rails on the rigid table saw. So we measured the door 79 5/8 by 20 something. I have it written down over there, but we get the idea to cut the stiles and the rails. So just keep in mind the middle rail, you'll have to cut a groove on each side because so that way your rail will fit on from the top and one from the bottom. So now it's time to cut the tones on the rails, and I'll do the setup and show how to cut in a second. Okay, so what we did was a ½ by ½ groove. Now we need to get a tone that's ½ by ½. So what we do, we set up our fence to a ½ inch. Then what you want to do is raise or lower your blade just enough so it would be a little bit shy of this surface right here and this surface. So when you're all said and done, it's just going to fit all perfectly. So it's going to take several tries. As you see, I tried it on this side and cut too much. So I took another little scrap piece and adjusted my height of the saw blade, and it's where it's at now. So that's it. So we're ready to start the other rails and put the door together.